spent 20 years in the US Department of Defense, working in the Office of Secretary of Defense for Policy. So across a variety of programs, acquisition, policy, geopolitical, regional security, but the common thread for all of that has been cooperative engagements and collaborative engagements across nations. I've had a long history working in Australia, but I've worked with JSF Program Office for 8 years, DARPA, the intelligence community. I worked with the Joint Strike Fighter for 8 years. I did foreign military sales for Israel and Singapore in that program. I've been at DARPA doing collaborative program arrangements, mission critical functionality across the entirety of the US Department of Defense, regional security issues. And then I came to Australia 5 years ago as the Secretary's Exchange Officer to the SecDef here. So I sat in Canberra for 2 years in strategic policy. And I decided to stay in the great tradition of Americans that come over on postings and get used to really great weather and good coffee. I went into industry for a while and consulting, but what I've always been very passionate about is the plight of SMEs. And it's a global challenge. It's the same wherever you go, and it's whether you're talking about the defense industrial base or you're talking about intelligence sharing, information getting from the top end of town to the little end of town, with government in between, is always a challenge. And so as Australia has gone through this revitalization of its defense industrial base, I understood that it was really important to have activity and a solid voice and experience behind SMEs. It's something I was passionate about. It's my home now, and that's where I put my energy. We were previously AID in Victoria. Essentially, we established and rebranded because we needed to fulfill our members' needs in a way that were not previously being met. With the paradigm shift in defense industry, sort of the traditional means of just networking weren't cutting it for us. There's significant policy implications, significant need to understand both the commercial and government environments in which SMEs have to operate. So once we became ADA Victoria, we formed a national partnership with the Defence Teaming Centre in South Australia and the Henderson Alliance in WA. Both organizations had very similar understandings, similar needs, and philosophically and ideologically we're aligned with ourselves. So we have this national partnership. The three organizations are their own organizations. We serve our members and we have a focus into the state. But when it comes to matters of national policy, we speak with one voice into government. And we have employed a model of shared services so that where we have capabilities, we leverage off of one another. Likewise, we offer reciprocity to the best extent we possibly can to our members. So it's truly a partnership. It's very real. We work closely together every day. And when it comes to matters of national policy, there's one input for government for us and one output. In ADA Victoria, we represent over 700 companies, SMEs. We have a few primes, but the vast majority of our companies are small and micro enterprise, and there's a layer of medium-sized. Nationally, through the partnership, we represent over 1,100 companies. They are a cross-section of producers of highly technical goods, ICT, cyber, manufacturers, fabricators, welders, gears, rubber, anything that's in sort of the production of traditional manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, academic and research institutions. But we also have a whole swath of professional service providers, so companies that provide systems engineering, BD and marketing skills, accountancy. Defense is a microcosm of the real world, so all of the things and requirements we have in any other industry in the commercial world also exist in defense, but there are companies that specialize in understanding what are the particular tax implications or cash flow implications of working with defense, so a CPA firm may be interested in joining. So it's a pretty broad capture. But for the most part, I'd say you're looking at technical and manufacturing. At an aegis level, we're looking at things, for instance, like AIC policy. Having government put an emphasis on Australian industry capability or content, depending on how you want to capture it, into acquisition programs is fantastic. But what is the implementation of that in practical terms? How does that actually shake out for companies? The primes have more facility to align themselves to the wants of government's policy requirements. They have the resources, they have the infrastructure, they have the people to flex. SMEs don't have that luxury. They are living it day to day. They are constrained in resources, they're constrained in scope. They don't have the knowledge or the reach-back capability that big companies do. And so ensuring that they understand how the policy determinations from Canberra impact them. And that doesn't mean that they read an 80-page document. It means that I read the 80-page document, or our teams read 80-page documents, and come together understanding that where it is most impactful for the SMEs, they understand that that will resonate with them. So if government says that their priority areas of export under the export strategy are the US, UK, and Europe, are companies that are looking to export into Asia going to be able to be as competitive to get grants and funding? Will they be viewed in the same way as those who are working in priority markets? These are all things that are really important to understand. The AIC strategy is not just the piece of paper that says this much work share is going into it, but it's how they adjust and how they align to those wants. It's how they get involved in team TDA missions. Do they meet the criteria? What is the criteria? So working with government, we've really prioritized understanding how the implementation of all of these wonderful initiatives that government's undertaken are, but how does it actually, in realistic terms, apply to companies? I think our key focal points right now, certainly we're taking a very hard look at how all of the aspects of Australian industry capability and plans turn out. So what kind of activity in something like naval shipbuilding, or how much participation of Australian industry is there? Absolutely, companies must be capable and they must be cost competitive, but they're competing at the same time against established supply chains in other parts of the world. And there's a cost for government associated with doing that, recertifying, retesting, re-engineering. And it's not as straightforward as just saying that the plan's going to align like this. So making sure that as this, and we don't really know yet, Land 400 Phase 2 is really the first program that's going to have AIC where we can start measuring it. But making sure that those opportunities are really presented both from a global supply chain perspective and within the supply chains under AIC auspices are incorporated as a focus. Ensuring that, from a tactical level, that our companies and our members have the training and the skills that they need to be as competitive as they possibly can. Ensuring that they have the certifications they need, understanding what those certifications are. A lot of our companies are coming in from outside of traditional defense markets, and whilst the skill sets and expertise that they bring is entirely transferable, and they work for major multinational companies in, say, the resources sector, they may not have ISO 9001 certification. Making sure that the policies the government puts out actually align to what they're doing. So making sure that the implementation of Australian industry capability is fair and equitable, and that we're actually seeing Australian companies have the opportunities, that they're actually equally competing with global counterparts in those programs, and that there is work resulting in that, provided that they are the best option, capability and price. Ensuring that we have a skilled workforce. So working on things like the Naval Shipbuilding College and the Workforce Skill and STEM strategy, ensuring that we identify where there are capability gaps and how do we fill them. Ensuring that the work stays in Australia, helping companies understand that they are not in fact competing with one another. They're competing with companies coming in from France or Germany or the US or the UK. Another thing we look at is sovereign industrial capability. So part of that is formed by AIC, but understanding that your sovereign capabilities are underpinned by a couple of things. One is economics, and the other, that it underpins is your regional security, your national security posture. So ensuring that you have a technological edge and advantage that you can draw upon should you not have the relationships you've traditionally relied on, and that's not to say, but we look at what's happening in the world, and whilst Australia has incredibly strong relationships with its partners and allies, and has good relationships with its neighbors, you don't want to be entirely reliant on somebody else in a time of crisis to pull that capability. So having the ability to draw upon your own strengths and your own industry is important. Under the partnership model, we're really focused on ensuring that our members get the best service they possibly can. They're as well positioned as they possibly can be to be competitive in this environment. And we give them the tools and the capabilities and the introductions and the access, and that's part of our role. But it's also incumbent on them to do some of the work. So they really have to understand that this is the hard yards involved in working in defense industry, or it's not just rhetoric, it's a very real thing. So making sure that they understand what the implications are to their business, making sure that they have other funding streams so that they can remain commercially viable while they pursue defense business, ensuring that they have the skilling, the training, the education, the engagement points, anything that we do to ensure that our members are making government's agenda successful and that government's agenda is properly supporting their success.